Hello again, and welcome back to the partay at the IBS Freedom Podcast. This is part 2 of a two-parter where we're talking about sleep. In the last episode, we told you that sleep's super important and absolutely definitely affects your gut. So now this is the episode where we talk about the how, right? We talked about the why. Now let's talk about the how. Like, how do you get better sleep? What kind of stuff goes into it? We were just trying to pronounce a fun word. You ought to take a stab at it.
Zeitgeber would be my.
I feel
my
like
guess.
this has to be a German word. If anybody's German in the audience,
I am
feel
German in descent, but
I have some German in me too.
Zeitgebers.
Yeah, the Grodbacks are all rolling in their grave right now. Zeitgebers. That's what I'm going to say. The Z word. So anyway, let me frame why we're even trying to pronounce this ridiculous word. So here's a little quote, for example, from a paper. Although light is the main driving agent for the master clock of the SCN, that is the central clock in your brain, other external cues, also called synchronizers or Zeitgebers, can influence the circadian rhythm synchronization. These include body temperature, meal times, social interactions, and physical exercise, and are particularly important for the circadian clock system in the peripheral tissues that cannot perceive daylight signals. You mean like the gut? Well, I'll be. So you have two clocks and they are trying to synchronize with each other. And when they're out of sync, things get weird, is the executive summary there.
Yeah, no, it's like really in terms of promoting optimal sleep, it's about regulating your circadian rhythm, which requires cues, you priming that rhythm so that it stays regular and consistent. And yeah, it's I think first and foremost, trying to get a little bit more outdoor light exposure. I know Dave Mayo talks a lot about this, and his site has some really good articles on this.
Yeah, it's the Hack Your Gut guy.
Hack Your Gut guy, Dave Mayo. But he always talks about too, even on a cloudy day, the light exposure outside is way brighter than anything inside. So if you can optimally go outside, if you can't, try to go close to a window. If you can, would be most optimal, I think, when it comes to light exposure in the morning or in like the earlier part of your day. And then at the same time, trying to avoid tons of screens in the evening. Now, again, like there's ways to maybe help with that if you had blue blockers. He also talks a lot about how the light in the room could affect things. So just dimming your lights can be helpful with helping with the circadian rhythm. So if you are in your room and it's approaching bedtime, to try to dim your lights a little bit so that they're not so bright. We have some really weird lights in our house that we moved in on. I just feel like they're LED. They're super bright. So a lot of times I'll kind of have our closet light on or like the bathroom light on, and then the actual light in our room's off, but it's still plenty bright for what we need to do in the evening. So a lot of times I'll kind of unwind with a little bit less light. And when Cece was, for anyone that has to wake up in the middle of the night, I don't know if that's a ton of listeners, but if you do, you can buy a red light lamp. So I just bought a red light bulb that I would plug into a regular lamp. And so whenever I'd have to wake up, she'd be in her bassinet or on the floor in a pack and play for a while. Now she's in her own room, but when she'd wake up, I would turn on the red light as a way to try to somewhat preserve their circadian rhythm when I'd wake up in the middle of the night. So anyone that does have a kid, that can be a good hot tip to try to keep circadian rhythms more consistent.
You heard it. Hot tip here.
Hot tip.
I think I also remember reading when I was breastfeeding Jess many moons ago. Side note, today is her 8th birthday. Holy crap.
Oh my God.
I'm processing that. But when I was breastfeeding her, I remember seeing something about like basically there are components of the mother's breast milk that oscillate throughout the day, and like breastfeeding can be helpful for circadian rhythm timing. Now, why that didn't work with CZ, I don't know, because she was breastfed. Lord knows that girl is still on the struggle bus for sleep. But I wanted to share, because you mentioned it once, there are apps for the smartphone and computer. For Android and PC users, at least, Twilight is the app on the smartphone, and you can fiddle with it, but you basically set that up and it will automatically change the color of your screen to a point where whenever I take screenshots and send them to people in the evening, I always laugh because I forget how pink my screen is until I send it. But that Twilight is on the phone, and then I have one on my computer called Flux, F.Lux. So that's for Android and PC. I don't know Apple because I don't do Apple personally.
Yeah. So I programmed my Apple. So if I click, I don't know what this button is, but if I triple click, it's like what's that called? Where it's like a shortcut. It's a shortcut thing. So if you press this 3 times, didn't work. See how it turns red?
Yep.
Now, sometimes I'll do that at night if I'm on my phone a little bit. Or I have blue blockers, so depending on what I want to do. But I don't know why it's not going back, but I can kind of go back and forth with it.
That's smart. Yeah, again, I knew it was possible on Apple. I know back in the day, Apple didn't let you fiddle with the color of the screen. Like that was some proprietary guarded thing, and you had to jailbreak your phone in order to do that. Now they have it built into the system somehow, so you don't need a third-party app, I think. But anyway, yeah, I think the primary, like 90+% of the cue that your brain gets is from light exposure. And just going out in the daylight and getting a little bit of light exposure on the old eyeballs is what you need to do. Now, I will say, again, I shared in the last episode, I'm still in crunch time working on some FODMAP freedom stuff with the big re-recording. So I'm in this weird phase where I'm talking about stuff on the podcast, but I'm not practicing what I preach. And
at least you're honest.
Totally. And, and I'm laughing because I'm doing all this research on sleep in particular right now. But I'm not going outside a ton. I'm not going on walks a ton. Also, part of it is I live in North Carolina and it's still fairly significantly hot here because we're recording this episode in early September. And it's still god awful hot and humid here. So I figure it's kind of okay that I'm not going outside a ton right now. And I'm not prioritizing that because I frankly don't want to go outside at the moment.
Like Satan's armpit.
Yes, exactly. Satan's armpit. It is horrific. So once I'm like, by the time this episode posts, I'll be at a better place with the FODMAP Freedom Project and the re-record and I'll be able to breathe a little bit more. But, I try to open up my windows sometimes, but when you mentioned having dim lights in the evening, we have the opposite problem. So we have what I can only describe, I'm looking at it right now, the one and only light that is a permanent fixture in this room, in the ceiling, we call it the boob. And we have a boob light in many of the rooms, and it's useless. Completely, utterly useless. It barely spits out 2 photons, which is mostly annoying. Like during the day when I want more light, it's very annoying. But I love it actually because I could have the boob light on and nothing else, and I could get a little bit more work done in the evening, and I don't feel like it's effing up my circadian rhythm tremendously. And Mike, even last night, Mike came in here to get me to sign something or do something. Maybe it was like 9:30 or 10. I was just wrapping up something real quick before bed, and he commented, was like, "Oh, the light is terrible in here. You need to turn on more lights, like your recording lights." And I'm like, no. Like, it's getting close enough to bedtime. I don't want to do that. So boob, sometimes I hate you and sometimes I'm grateful for you. But in this context, I think I'd rather have the boob plus a bunch of ancillary lights that I can control independently.
Right. No, I think I'd prefer that. I'd love to just change out our light bulbs, but that just feels like such a hard task to do. It's not hard,
do you have
but
really
I just
high
don't want to do
ceilings? Like, maybe.
No, just like there's so many light bulbs. There's so many light bulbs in our bathroom.
Let me get out the tiny violin.
I know.
The tiny violin. Oh my goodness.
Nikki, I haven't slept in a year. These things seem actually longer than that because there were months when I had her where I couldn't sleep. Probably like a year and 4 months.
Can I tell you something on the note of childbirth, by the way, since we're talking about this? I
Are you
love
pregnant?
I love the week or two leading up to Jess's birthday because it's a lot of posts about no baby yet because everybody was asking me and I was posting on Facebook. I died laughing over the weekend. There was one post in particular that I read out loud to my mom and Mike, and it was basically like, no baby yet today, folks. We've done everything to try to get her to come out. Today alone, I got acupuncture, I got adjusted, we drove on a bumpy road, I ate something spicier. Like I rattled off 5 or 6 different things. Oh, and I did like an essential oil rub on my belly and still nothing. And then I was naive enough to say, this is so time consuming trying to like get her to come out.
Right.
I can't wait to have my life back. I was like, oh, sweet summer child. If only you knew how wrong you were.
Yeah.
Yes, at
Yeah.
that moment, that particular day, I spent several hours trying to coax this child out of my womb, but that was the beginning of the end.
Ignorance is bliss.
I know, ignorance is bliss. I don't know what I thought having a baby was going to be like, but it apparently was very different than the reality because I said I would get my life back. Ha! Anyway, marching on with sleep. Okay, sunlight on the eyeballs, preferably in the first half of the day. Huge. Go, even if it's a 5-minute walk, or even if you sit your butt on your front porch, that's still better than nothing. Heck, I told you this. I have a patient right now. Initially, I said, can you go for like a 5-minute walk once a day? No can do. Okay, cool. Pivot. Let's have you go get like a $20 lounge chair, like folding beach chair from Walmart or Amazon. Put that in, on your patio or your deck or your yard and go sit your butt in that chair and get 5 minutes of sun on your face that way. Nope, no can do. Nope, too hard. Okay. It's like, do you have a sun puddle? Do you have a window that has sunlight coming in and it makes like a sun puddle on the floor? And he said, yeah. I'm like, cool. Your new thing is to just walk from the bedroom out to the living room, put your face in the sun puddle for 5 minutes one time a day. As of the recording of this episode, he has yet to do that. But I thought that was a pretty brilliant pivot, if I do say so myself.
Yes.
I feel like most everybody, minus maybe the folks in Alaska, could do the sun puddle thing, if nothing else. Even if you don't want to leave your house or you can't leave your house or you're locked in your house. I don't know. Like most everybody can find a sun puddle and just put your face in the sun puddle for 5 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Related. Sorry.
Yes.
I was just going to bring up the idea of meal timing. Were you going to go to that next?
Yeah, I think meal timing and nutrition was where I was going to go. So yes.
Well, you can take it away. You're the R to the D registered dietitian in the house. But
yeah,
I shared in the last episode that meal timing and like erratic meal time versus consistent meal time and the speed at which you eat your food is highly associated with irritable bowel syndrome symptoms like bloating and abdominal pain. But also there's like the quality of the nutrition and the fiber and that sort of stuff to talk about too. So take it away, RD.
Yeah.
I'll kick back.
Well, and the meal timing thing is one of those things where sometimes people are like, well, do you want it to be exactly 8 a.m. every morning or 12 p.m. is when I eat lunch and 6 p.m. It doesn't have to get that nitty gritty, but if you're just getting closer to more consistent meals of having a pretty consistent breakfast, a pretty consistent lunch, a pretty consistent dinner, that's what you want.
Consistent, but not anal.
Right. Consistent, but not anal. That's a good principle in life, just in general. And in terms of nutrition, I know we talked about in the last episode how going too low carb, I think, is very problematic for a number of reasons. When it comes to balance of blood sugar overnight, carbs can be really important. So if carbs dip too low and you don't have enough stored in your glycogen, that can lead to the body needing to do plan B, which usually is more rousing because it requires cortisol. So the body needs to make some glucose. It activates cortisol to do so because it's breaking down protein instead of using stored carbs. So that can be a really big issue, especially if people are rousing at night. So a lot of people that I work with are not getting great sleep quality because they're waking up a bunch at night. And sometimes people are saying, oh, I'm waking up a bunch to pee. And it's like there could be different things going on there, but it still could be a cortisol induced wake up to go pee, if that makes sense. If you're drinking a ton of water or something and you go once, like that might make sense. But sometimes people just kind of have this attitude when I talk to them where they'll say, oh no, it's just my like regular thing because I just need to pee each night 4 times. And it's like, well, maybe you're just waking up to pee because of the cortisol reaction or the adrenaline reaction or some of the stuff that you're experiencing at night that's causing rousings.
Yeah, I would say you could also describe it as like the threshold needed to wake you up is lowered, right?
Right.
So for example, I've noticed this myself. I've gone through periods of time where I am waking up like once a night to pee, but I'll
Yeah.
tell you, in the waking hours, I have a bladder of steel. And
Right.
in my family, we would say I have great puckering strings.
Yeah.
Like I can hold it like a camel. That's not a big deal for me. So it's weird when I'm arousing at night and going to go to the bathroom. I'm like, this isn't purely bladder related,
Right.
because I know my bladder and I know my puckering strings and I know what I'm capable of. So it always is kind of like a little bit red flaggy to me that something else is up. And I
Right.
have seen it correlate with stress personally for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now maybe that's a cortisol link and a like adrenaline link, or maybe it's something else. But
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed that with me.
Yeah. But yeah, I think from my standpoint, a lot of times when I work with clients, I'll say sleep seems to be problematic. If they say their quality is poor, like they struggle to fall or stay asleep, I'll usually say, let's look at nutrition first. And you could do some gentle things, like maybe work a little bit on sleep hygiene, but sometimes I just generally see once nutrition is more optimized, sleep is so much easier. Um, so that's something to think about too. You might not really be connecting the dots that nutrition could help with sleep, but optimizing calories, optimizing carbs are going to be really important in getting a deep, restful, high quality level of sleep. So that kind of thing is just something I see all the time, that once those factors are taken care of, it really boosts sleep. Might not be the only thing at play, but definitely should be a foundational factor that might have a really big impact on sleep.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about, again, just the hormones and the chemistry involved in this process, like you said, normally your blood sugar is largely stabilized by cortisol. And
Yeah.
then like, I guess more cortisol release is like plan B, like you said, and then plan C is adrenaline.
Right.
So it's like your body's upping the ante more and more to stabilize your blood sugar, and that's going to wake you up. So
Yeah.
I do think blood sugar regulation is pretty huge. You know what? I'm laughing. This was not intentional, but I have an image pulled up. I've been meaning to send it to you for further discussion. I pulled it out of a slide deck from a presentation I was going back through from years ago. And basically like the presenter had mapped out when insulin sensitivity is the best. And she was kind of making, now granted, her presentation was about PCOS. So speaking about insulin sensitivity, like that can be very important in that crowd. But I remember her argument was insulin sensitivity is best in the morning through maybe mid-afternoon, and then it gets worse and worse until you go to bed. So her argument was if you eat carbs, you should eat them in the morning and maybe at lunchtime, not at night. But I don't know about you. I've had several people where they're sleeping like crap and we just have them add some carbs to their evening meal and then they sleep better.
Yeah.
So it's like you see this stuff and you think, oh, I have to like optimize and
Right.
do this, and carbs are bad in the evening. But I don't know, man. I've seen I've seen the addition of carbs at night be really helpful for sleep. So I don't think that's strictly true, especially for women.
Yeah. I know, I mean, this is going way back in the archives of when I used to listen to Chris Masterjohn all the time. But I do know he always talked about too, trying to even avoid eating like high carbs. And he might, or not high carbs, high protein. That protein seems to be more, causes more alertness in the evening versus carbs. So I think he was talking more so in like a more of a late night snack or like a snack preceding bedtime, that you would want it to be something carby and maybe with a little bit of fat, but not with a ton of protein. I'd have to look up exactly the context of which he was saying that, but I know he was saying, you don't really want to eat like tons of protein right before you go down to bed. It might make you more alert.
Well, I guess that might make some sort of evolutionary sense. And I'm pulling this out of total left field. I have no training in this field. But if you think how our species lived for a lot of years, protein almost always meant that you had just killed an animal and you were going to eat the protein.
Right.
And so you would have to have your adrenaline pumping for the hunt and the kill. And like you would need to lug this big carcass back to your village or whatever. But also I'm imagining I could kind of see like having a surplus of protein around could signal to other predators that they need to come to where you're at to steal the kill from you. So I could kind of see like protein signaling more like defense and sympathetic mechanisms. That's actually a really interesting thing to noodle on.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think another thing that we didn't talk about carbs-wise in the evening is that it just kind of promotes melatonin production. So again, I think slating a little bit more carbs in the evening, and there could be nuance, like you said, in terms of what's going on for that individual person, but could really help with sleep. And again, it's a really simple suggestion of, oh, why don't you eat a little bit more carbs? Or if you weren't eating carbs in the evening really at all, definitely make sure you're eating some.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you also mentioned, I feel like this one ties in with calories in general and carbs, both. But I think I've mentioned before, I really find a lot of benefit in fasting. And I'll do like every so often I'll do like a 2 or 3 day water and tea only fast. And my brain feels great. Like my brain feels alive, like firing on all cylinders. It's amazing. But what I noticed is I got into fasting shortly before 2020 and everything hit the fan. And I did great with it. I consistently felt amazing when I did fasting. Then 2020 happened. And basically for like 2020 and 2021, those 2 years when everything was going to HE double hockey sticks in a handbag, I tried on numerous occasions to do a fast and I couldn't do it. Every single time I tried, it blew up in my face and I felt really bad and I couldn't sustain it for more than like a day. And I remember one of those times I fasted successfully through the day and I was feeling pretty okay, maybe like a little bit shaky, woozy, but not bad. It was enough that like I could turn it around with a little bit of glycerin or something. And so I went to sleep and it was no joke, the worst sleep of my entire life. I tossed and turned, and I had an Oura ring at the time. I tossed and turned like every 10 minutes.
Oh God.
For a couple hours. And it just like awake the entire night. I don't think I slept even a wink. And finally it was like 2 a.m. And I finally kind of like looked at my watch, looked at the time, and I figured out what was happening. And I just kind of went, all right, uncle, fine, I give up. And at 2:00 in the morning, I went into the kitchen. I made myself a big breakfast. I mean, I had like 3 or 4 eggs, avocado, toast, butter on the toast. I had this big old meal. I ate the meal. I stayed up for maybe another 20 minutes so that I could digest for a few minutes. And then I went back to sleep and I slept like a freaking baby. So clearly my blood sugar was dipping low enough that my body was in in kind of survival mode. It was like, screw you, man. We are not in a position to sleep right now. Are you crazy? No.
Yeah.
But when stress chemistry was not so crazy because, we made it out of 2020 and 2021 successfully. Now, in more recent years, now I'm able to fast again and I feel totally fine.
Yeah.
So I
No,
think there's
it's
also like the
so-
interplay with stress chemistry too.
Oh, for sure. The one last thing I'll say about, which you kind of mentioned it, I just want to clarify too. When calories are low, your body can't store glycogen because it's burning everything you're eating. Um, so, uh, when you're in a 700 calorie deficit or 500 calorie deficit, you can't really fill up the storage of carbs to help you through the night. So it can really lead to crappy sleep if your calorie deficit is low. So you might be saying, oh, I feel like I'm eating carbs. Maybe your calories are a little bit low then. So just something to consider there. And I think that your talk about how stress interplayed with your ability to fast is probably a good transition into how stress could probably affect sleep and just your nervous system being more in fight or flight, and kind of the hormonal cascade with that, with cortisol and that kind of thing. Stress chemistry in general can definitely play a huge role in whether you're sleeping or not.
Yeah. Well, again, it makes evolutionary sense, right? If you, on some level, if your body thinks that you're running away from the saber-toothed tiger, you're not going to stop running away and take a quick nap. Right? Like
Yeah.
that's not a thing. Your body, when you're in survival mode, you are not going to sleep. And that's very physiologically advantageous to have it be wired that way. The problem is that a lot of us have stress day in and day out that is not running from the saber-toothed tiger. And our
Right.
bodies are still like, we have this mismatch. And it's tricky. But as we've talked about in other episodes, it's not to say that you have to get rid of all of your stress or that the goal is to have zero stress. I think that reducing your stress where you are able to do so, right?
Yeah.
Like for some people, that means looking for a different job. And maybe it takes you a while to get out of your current job, but maybe that is part of your journey. For some of you, it might just be like distancing from a really toxic friend who doesn't fill your cup, so to speak, and that they're adding bricks to your backpack.
Right.
For other people, maybe doing marriage counseling, whatever it might be. But of course, I pick like 3 of the hardest things to do.
Right.
Okay. I have to give easier ones because now people are like, shoot, now I really don't want to do the
All right.
stress thing. Damn it. I knew I was right. Shoot, Amy, give us some easy examples of reducing stress.
I mean, from my standpoint, the best stress managers are the ones that can meet their needs on a daily basis. So even just getting into the exercise of trying to ask yourself, like, what do I need today? Or like, what sounds good today? And trying to do something for yourself each day, I think is a really good stress management technique. And again, it doesn't have to be fancy. It could literally be just going outside and sitting on your patio for a minute, or
Yeah.
it could be cuddling with your dog for longer than typical. It could be spending time and playing with your kids. Like there's different things to think about, and it might vary day to day. I think one other aspect too I'll pull in is I remember Dave Mayo talking about this too, talking how circadian rhythms anchor cortisol rhythms. Because again, like there's an aspect of that too. So again, they all these things connect. So in terms of like building stress resilience, probably working on sleep and circadian rhythms are going to help with stress chemistry too. So it's like it is strange how much they connect, but yeah, I would say just being able to assess your needs a little bit better and working on trying to do something for 10 to 15 minutes a day would be the easiest thing.
So self-care, quote unquote, or
Yeah.
hobbies
Yeah,
is another
hobbies,
one.
passions.
So not everybody has to leave their spouse or quit their job, which is what I led with. I led with the worst possible examples.
I mean, I think that it's good to know though, because sometimes we do talk to people that we work with and it's they're talking about how they're working 70 hours a week and you're like, ugh. And then we have to be the ones that are kind of trying to hint in a subtle way that, hey, like, it seems like you're working a lot. Like,
Yeah.
how are you balancing things? And try to, subtly bring it up because it
Yeah.
is like a really hard thing to change and you might not be able to do it right now,
Well, and people
especially if it's a
get
job
touchy. People
situation.
get cranky about it, to be
Yeah.
quite honest. I would prefer the more direct route of telling people like, hey, this is my assessment. I think
Right.
you need a different job. But people get real defensive real quick when you're that direct with the stress conversation. But anyway, yeah, everything in the body's connected to everything else,
Right.
right? Like I've joked before, your right big toenail is probably connected to your left eyebrow, and we just don't know how yet. So I think everything in the body's connected, but especially like what we would kind of call the adrenals or the HPA axis, which
Mm-hmm.
involves cortisol and stress chemistry and how you handle stress. That coupled with the autonomic nervous system, so like the vagus
Yeah.
nerve and fight or flight versus rest and digest, like those things in particular are so interconnected and married together. I feel like you can't talk about one without the other to some degree.
Right.
And I even kind of think a lot of the herbs that supposedly help the adrenals, like adaptogens, which side note, we still need to do an adaptogen episode. I don't know how we've gotten away with this. We have 2 episodes on nervines, but we don't have a single episode on adaptogens yet. So we need to slate that for the fall or the winter. But my point in bringing this up is that these adaptogen herbs like ginseng and reishi and ashwagandha, like everybody talks about them in the context of the adrenal glands. But I think that they honestly work more on the nervous system and like the autonomic nervous system and the HPA axis from a top down standpoint rather than like being really pointed at the adrenal glands themselves.
Right. Or being
But
like, I'm just affecting cortisol.
yeah, or like I'm just working on this particular, the cortex of the adrenal
Right.
gland. Like that's not how it works. But yeah, so we need to do that in a full episode because they do deserve a full episode of their own. But even anecdotally, I'll share this. This is not to say that everybody has to run out and do this and buy this right now, but I have played around for years with doing, and I'm going to use air quotes kind of, vagus nerve stimulation with people. I think the real way to stimulate and tone your vagus nerve, we talked about recently, is connection and really engaging with your life. But there is research on forcibly stimulating or like medically stimulating the vagus nerve and how that can help with things like Crohn's and tummy problems and motility. And I do see it as an effective tool. I'll use a TENS unit sometimes for this purpose. And just for what it's worth, clinically, I do see that probably 80 or 90% of people, when they do vagus nerve stimulation, they will report that they get sleepy afterwards.
Mm.
So again, I think it's called rest and digest for a reason, right?
Right.
All of us care about it from the digestion standpoint, but also it helps promote rest and recovery and kind of winding down your nervous system and winding down that adrenal response. So I think that things that tone your vagus nerve or improve vagal tone, like again, connection and joy and awe and empathy and compassion and self-compassion, like all of those things would probably help stress, even if it's indirectly by facilitating vagal tone, and then that improves stress.
Right. Right. No, such a good point.
It
Yeah,
all is a mishmash
it is a
together.
mish. It is.
It is.
Yeah, I'm trying to think too. I think you mentioned movement being helpful again last episode, so I don't really think we need to touch on that a whole lot.
Yeah, we could just say movement is helpful.
Right. That
If
was
you
me saying
tucker-
movement.
Yeah, if you
Movement.
tucker yourself out, you're going to sleep like a rock. That's another unfortunate one for me. I'm laughing at myself a lot these 2 episodes because, frankly, again, I shared last
You're
time.
literally just revealing all your hangups right now, when in
We are.
reality, you're just
We
you're in
all
a
have
weird
'em.
time. You're in a phase.
Well, yes and no. But here's the thing, like historically in my life, I haven't really prioritized sleep as far as the circadian rhythm,
Mm,
bedtime, wake time. Like that has been a lifelong thing that I haven't ever
right.
really prioritized it. Again, I've usually been pretty good at prioritizing the quantity of sleep and nailing that for the most part.
Right.
But similarly, outside of the years when I was a rower and I was very dedicated to rowing and I wanted to be the best rower I possibly could be, outside of that 6 year span of time, I have not been super into movement consistently. Like I'll go through periods where I work out really diligently and then I'll totally fall off the wagon for months. And then I'll work out really diligently and then I'll fall off the wagon
Right.
for months. So that's another one that I'm laughing at myself for because that's another kind of goal of mine going
Mm,
into the fall and the winter is I just want to be a little bit more regular with some amount of movement or some amount of physical activity. Nothing crazy, nothing heroic. I don't need to compete
right.
in rowing ever again, but that's another one that I need to be more consistent with.
Yeah. I mean, a part of it though, too, like just the burnout of maybe being a rower for 6 years sort of
That was a big part of it.
is a lot of movement for a 6 year period of time. Um, so yeah, you can cut yourself a little bit of slack.
Thank you.
Um, but yeah, I one thing too, I don't know if we really mentioned it that you just brought up, which is like sleep timing, bedtime, wake up time being consistent is really important for the circadian rhythm, which kind of makes sense. But just thinking of the context of sleep hygiene in general, like, do you have a sleep routine? Is also another thing to maybe consider. Are there things that generally help you like ease into your night and feel calm and sleepy versus things that rev you up? Like my husband, oh God. So he does ghost hunting. And again, I'm a wuss when it comes to like ghosts or scary things, but he's always like, watch my video because he'll make videos of his ghost hunts. And it's always at like 9:30 at night, right before I'm gonna go to bed. And I'm like, Armand, I really don't want to watch this right now. But of course he like pressures me into it. But don't let anyone pressure you into watching ghost videos
That's
at
right.
night. Or anything scary like the news. Sometimes those types of activities that are really like stimulating and get your brain working in a way that's not going to be conducive for sleep isn't great. Um,
I feel like that's one thing our generation has got right. Like I laugh, my in-laws and my parents both religiously watch the evening news every night of their lives. Like they'll watch the 6 p.m. news and then they'll watch the 11 p.m. news, like something new
right.
happened.
Right.
And I think it's laughable. And, they'll be like, well, we have to watch it for the weather. I'm like, you have a smartphone, you have the internet, you can Google the weather. They have apps even. I'm
Right.
sure the Weather Channel has an app. But yeah, even the news I think is pretty stressful. Or I think this is another example of you might look at somebody and be like, well, they watch the news before bed and they're totally fine.
Right.
Or like a mystery show or a murder show or something. But it's in the eye of the beholder. And my example is this was in like 2020, I think. So everybody's cortisol was through the roof. Everybody's vagus nerve, they were fried to a damn crisp. And I was no exception. I came to the realization at some point, I think in 2020, I was watching like half an episode or an episode of The Gilmore Girls. I was binging it on Netflix when it was on
Mm,
Netflix at the time. And I was watching like an episode of The Gilmore Girls every night before bed on my phone, just laying in bed. And I had the realization when they came to the part where, sorry if I'm going to spoil this, but it's like, it's an old enough show that this shouldn't be a spoiler. But the part where Luke and Lorelai broke up for the first time,
mhm.
I was so, and I knew that was going to happen. I'd seen the
Right.
show years ago. It wasn't like a
Right.
new thing to me, but just reliving that and the trauma of Luke and Lorelai breaking up when I knew that they belonged together, that was stressful enough. And I realized that those couple of episodes, like I wasn't sleeping well
Right.
after watching those episodes. And I was like, oh my God, have I lost resiliency to the point where I can't watch the Gilmore Girls before bed?
Right.
So
Right.
it doesn't have to be like a murder mystery or the news. It could be something seemingly benign that's actually revving up your nervous system more than you realize. So be very careful what you consume late at night.
Yeah, for sure. Even like books, sometimes books can be a little bit, but I think books typically can be great depending on the genre. But yeah, I think you almost have to know how your body typically reacts to things, and how sensitive you are to certain stimuli.
Exactly. And see,
But
this is why now, as I'm getting ready for sleep, I basically exclusively watch foraging videos and K-pop
there
because
you go.
there's nothing stressful. I'm watching these young whippersnappers dance like there's no tomorrow. They are boogie woogieing on that dance floor, and I'm just in awe of them and their splendor and enjoying the music. So there's nothing stressful in K-pop, really.
Yeah.
Watching
Yeah.
K-pop videos and my foraging videos, I'm learning how to like, find stuff frolicking out in the woods. So I think I
Right.
found the things that are okay for me at night, but also I want to get back into reading more in the evening.
Yeah.
So
A couple other things are coming up too, just randomly now that we're talking about things. Um, One being, how is your potential partner or pets? Are they in bed with you? Because that could also affect your sleep quality a lot too. Like I would love for my dog to sleep in my bed, but I know I would sleep way worse. Um, he wants to like suction cup his body next to mine, which is a no-go for me. I'm very temperature sensitive at night. So like my husband has to be like over on that side of the bed. I have to be over on this side
get
of the
out of here.
bed.
I don't want to know you're here, Armand.
But when we first got married, we really struggled because we got like a new mattress. And it was a really nice mattress, but we got a new mattress, and we were in the queen. But I realized it was way too hot for me. Like him sleeping next to me, I slept horrible. He was like a furnace. It was like sleeping next to a furnace. So I'm like, okay, we need to do something. So then I bought a chili pad, which I do really like. It's expensive. It's more of a fancy dancy sleeping tool, but it's basically an air conditioner for your bed. So it's a mattress pad. You kind of put it over. I just bought the one for my half of the bed, so it's not going on Armand's side, but I put the one across our bed, on my side of the bed, and then you can control the temperature. So that's a game changer, especially in the hotter months, like summer. I use it all the time. Especially because our room is over our garage, so it doesn't stay as cool. Um, but that is something to consider because body temperature can be important when it comes to sleep and temperature in general. I find some people are not as temperature sensitive as me. I tend to be a weirdo about temperature changes with sleep. So it
I
actually
feel like that's pretty common though. I don't know if you're such a weirdo. I think I'm the weirdo that I'm not I'm not a hot sleeper.
Yeah, it's weird. Like even there were a few weeks where it was like 95 or above here for like a week. Oh, I sleep terrible during those weeks just because our room's
I
hotter.
remember this will freak you out. I remember I worked with this woman, this was years ago. And I think her chief complaint was fatigue and brain fog related, not GI. And we did a lot of fancy schmancy things, didn't make a whole lot of forward progress. It was only at like the tail end of working together. And I think right before she kind of pieced out on me, I learned that she said her husband grew up in like New Orleans, I think. And he loved heat and humidity. And he kept the house at like 80 degrees.
Oh my God.
And I remember kind of talking to her and thinking, ooh, I wonder if there's mold, first of all. But second of all, like, of course you're not going to sleep well in an
Right.
80-degree house in the hot Satan's armpit south, too, where there's
Right.
humidity on top of that. So, yeah, I think I actually ask what temperature people keep their house at for sleep. Like that inspired me. I added a question to my intake questionnaire just so I could catch weirdos like that. I think most people keep their house somewhere between like 70 and 74 degrees Fahrenheit for sleep.
Ooh,
I
we're
think
lower than that. We're like 67, but our room gets really hot. So it probably isn't 67 in our room.
Yeah, I think we keep ours at like 71, 72 at night.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have that same problem like you do above the
It's weird.
the garage. But yes, just perhaps lowering your temperature at night could be a really big thing. It'll cost you a few extra bucks for your energy bill, I'm sure, but that could be really, really impactful. And that could be a lot cheaper than getting like a new mattress, a new pillow, a bunch of supplements.
Yeah, one other thing you could potentially do, and again, I don't know the cost savings of it, but you could, if it was just your room, I've debated on getting like a unit that's just like for a small room.
Yeah, a window unit, like
not even
AC
a window unit, like you can put it on your floor. I mean, you could get a window unit too, but
I'm just like imagining, I don't know how good those floor ones would be, because then like
they're kind of expensive. Like the ones that I'm talking about are maybe like $400 or $500, and they sit on your floor, and they do work. My brother had one for his daughter's room that would get really hot, but you know, there's different things you could do if you're really temperature sensitive, but you know, you could tinker around with it and see how it affects things. Again, even getting a king size bed also helped a lot. So like we added an extra layer of distance between my husband and I. My husband,
we have a king also, and I can't imagine Actually, we slept on a queen bed for 2 weeks when we were in Buffalo this summer, and we were like, "Oh God, you're so close! Like, get out of here!"
I know. Go to your side.
Yeah, I have on my side.
My husband snores sometimes too, which is also a tricky situation.
Yep. Mike does too.
I think that in those situations, I don't know, those could be tough to maneuver. Sometimes you can find like a nice middle ground or something where, I don't know, we're trying to investigate why your husband or spouse is snoring a lot could also be an interesting suggestion. Oh, yeah. and headphone earplugs. Nikki's got some earplugs.
Yep, I've got a couple of accessories here for the video. So I get these squishy earplugs, and I keep a couple of them on my side of the bed. And if Mike is snoring to the point where it's disturbing me, I'll put one of these in. If he snores loudly enough that I could still hear him through this, I will say like, okay, I won't say Mike. This is going to reveal something weird about us. When we're trying to get each other's attention around the house, we have developed this habit that we'll say meow to each other. We just meow at each other. So oftentimes when I'm kind of getting his attention in the middle of the night, I'll say meow, meow. And then he'll wake up and be like, oh, what? I'm like, solid wood, man.
Yeah.
Reposition, and then he'll roll over and then he'll be fine.
Right.
But earplugs, I do keep those handy. I also, may I segue into some gadgets and accessories I had to show?
Yes, please.
Eye mask.
I have that exact eye mask.
It's like an eyeball bra.
All right.
So funny story about this, by the way, that I'll share. So I took this with me when I went to like some sort of seminar or conference or something. And I got in bed, I put this on, like I turned out the lights, I put this on, I put my phone down, and I laid down. And then after a minute, I was like, ooh, did I set my alarm? I have to check. So I picked up my phone, and I was looking at my phone, and I'm like tapping on the screen, clicking the buttons, and my phone wasn't turning on. And I was like, oh my God. I think I was in Maryland. I was like, oh my God, I'm far away from home and I don't have my phone. What do I do? And it took me an embarrassingly long amount of time, like a solid 8 seconds of this panic, to realize that I had an eye mask on. And that is why I couldn't see my phone screen. And it was so good at blocking the light that I did, and it was so comfy that I didn't even realize I had it on my face. But the thing is, when you have the eyeball bra one that has like the cutouts for the eyeballs, I could open my eyes and I didn't feel anything. Right? Like if I had just a regular flat thing on my face, I would have felt my eyelashes touching it.
Lame mask without a built-in eyeball bra
Oh, the
Wow, that's a
eyeball
tongue.
bra. That is kind of a tongue twister. The eyeball bra is clutch. So
Right.
I keep that. Mostly I use it for travel, but occasionally for home. Another accessory that I enjoy is this thing. I don't use it all the time, but this thing was on the Amazon.com, and it has like the little headphone things built into the headband, and then you've got a
Oh,
play and pause button. So if you put on, I'm just going to keep this on now. So you can lay on your side and listen to headphones versus if you try to put earbuds or something in, they're,
yeah, uncomfortable.
smushing into your ear canal, and it's uncomfortable. With this one, you don't get that effect and it'll stay on you. But sometimes I'll put on like sleep meditations or sleep audios or something.
Yeah.
Jason Stevenson is on YouTube. He has a lot of free stuff on YouTube. He also has some stuff on like iTunes that you can purchase. And he has the dreamiest Australian accent
Wow.
and just the greatest content. So sometimes I'll put on Jason Stevenson or just some nice music or like beach waves or something, and I'll listen to that. The final accessory I brought for show and tell is this little bad boy. This is my shock you alarm.
Oh my gosh.
So this is called Pavlok, Pavlok, and it is an alarm clock watch that zaps you awake if
It's your
need be.
shock collar.
It is. It's like a shock collar. So the thing about it, so I do like it, and they have some fail safes in there. So there is a way to make it more difficult to take off, for example, so that you can't just take it off in the night. I don't love sleeping with a watch on, I've realized. So that's kind of my hang up at the moment right
Yeah.
now, is just like having that big bulky thing on my wrist. I don't really love. So I'm trying to figure out a way around that, but it works really well. So for this one, the way I have it set, it will vibrate first, then it will chime and make noise at me. And then if I still haven't turned it off and disabled it, then it will zap me. So most of the time when I do use it, I never get zapped now because you could either disable it with jumping jacks or you could disable it by scanning a QR code, which you
Right.
put in a different room. So I'm usually quick enough to get up and go scan the QR code that it never ends up zapping me anymore. But I do like it. It's for people who are really difficult to wake up in the morning like I am. I do like it. And I'm trying to train my circadian rhythm a little bit more. So maybe it's just a matter of getting over the whole like, oh, I don't like the sensation on my wrist when I sleep kind of a thing. I need to just get over it. Couple other things though, really quick. Sorry, Mixmaster Mike, you're going to have to edit that out. So if you refer back, we have 2 episodes about, I think we titled it Herbs for Stress, and it's all about nervines. And we talk about like lavender and chamomile and passion flower and catnip and all of these lovely herbs, lemon balm. Go refer back to that episode. There's a lot of stuff in there that would be helpful. I totally accidentally figured this out. There are lavender essential oil gel caps that are usually kind of geared for anxiety stuff. I happened to try them and I noticed that they helped with my sleep. And remember earlier I was saying that sometimes despite having a good puckering strings, I would wake up in the middle of the night to pee. And that's like an indication to me that my threshold is lowered or I'm more stressed than I realized. This pretty much corrected that issue for me in 1 dose overnight. Now, that symptom has waxed and waned, and my use of this has waxed and waned. I'm using it again, but yeah, this one is called Lavender SAP. There's another one, I think it's called, I forget, but
Like
integrative.
Lavella.
Yeah.
It's something like that.
I think both of them are the Lavella product, if I remember
Right.
correctly, but there's basically an identical product from Integrative Therapeutics. It's $1 more. So I get this one because it's just $1 cheaper and it works fine. But the lavender gel caps, other supplements that I've seen be really useful for sleep specifically, chamomile and passion flower are probably 2 of the best like nervine herbs that I've seen for stress
Right.
and sleep rather. Butyrate, I grabbed a bottle of butyrate to remind me to say that. There does appear to be a pretty good amount of research that butyrate modulates the circadian clock and the gut-brain axis in a way that could be favorable for sleep. Glycine, dirt cheap. You could get it in a big old jug like this, and it's a pretty tasty powder. And you could take some glycine before bed. That could help with sleep as well. I think I said CBD oil, right? CBD, a little bit more expensive, but that can help sometimes with sleep. There are others.
Magnesium is one that sometimes helps people with sleep.
Yeah, magnesium. Valerian is really famous for sleep. I think
valerian's too strong for me. I tend to be a little sensitive. Like that feels like knocked out over the head with something and then I'm drowsier in the morning.
Yeah.
But I like lavender. I've historically liked lemon balm.
Yeah.
I like chamomile, like teas are usually fine. Just like the valerian was too strong.
Well, and valerian is one of those herbs, if I remember correctly, it's said to be not just relaxing, but overtly sedating.
Right.
Similarly, if you don't like that, you probably wouldn't appreciate California poppy either, because California poppy is quite sedating as well. So yeah, there's a difference between something like chamomile that just kind of takes the edge off and calms you down a bit,
right,
and like settles you down, versus something that a little bit more forcibly is zonking you out. So the way that you described it makes a lot of sense.
It's like, I'm gonna knock you out with this brick. But I feel like I sleep really deep. It's kind of like I'm pretty sensitive to melatonin too. It's similar to that feeling where I wake up groggy and not as alert. But again, I really like lemon balm. And again, I like some of the other herbs that you're saying, but that one just seems to be intense for me.
Yeah. Well, so honestly, I'm almost at a point where I'm going to say something that might rub some people the wrong way. I feel like if you need lemon balm, or I'm sorry, if you need something like valerian to sleep, you might be masking something else.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, like, if you require that amount of sedation to get a proper night's sleep, that should be a red flag that you are not managing your blood sugar, your stress, your movement, your life. And there's something else kind of lurking in the background. Like, you can band-aid the symptom of poor sleep with something like valerian if you need to for a short period of time.
Right.
But if you need to use valerian on a regular basis, I feel like that's almost kind of red flaggy to me at this point.
Right.
Yeah, because it's very strong. Also, it's one of the stinkiest herbs you ever did smell. It is so stinky.
Stank. Got that stank on it.
It got that stank for sure. But melatonin, I'm glad you brought up too. I think that people have different levels of sensitivity to melatonin. I've met people that, like, any dose whatsoever makes them feel groggy and hungover and terrible the next day. I, for whatever reason, could take a truckload of the stuff and I'm fine.
Yeah. For me, it was funny. There were like low dose. It's hard to find a low dose. I would say it's usually like under a gram, or is it, I'm trying to think, a milligram.
Yeah, a milligram.
I usually do under a milligram. So like a half milligram or 0.75 milligrams. And sometimes Armand would have these. This would only usually be if we were like traveling or something. I don't regularly use it, but if I really needed to get sleep and was worried I might not fall asleep, he has these like ZzzQuil gummies that are like a mixture of nervine herbs, like lavender, chamomile, valerian, and like a little melatonin. It's kind of like everything but the kitchen sink nervine blend.
Okay.
And then a little bit, it's 2 gummies equate to 2 milligrams of melatonin. But what I would do is I would like take a little like gerbil nibble. It was kind of gross because I'd take like a gerbil nibble of 1. So I'd be getting maybe 0.5 milligrams. And then I would set it like on my nightstand and take that the next night if I felt like I needed it. So it was just kind of funny, but that felt fine. It's like when I start getting into like the 1-2 milligrams, which is still a low dose for most people.
It is,
I feel like that's my limit. But I do feel like I get benefit at low doses if I really need to try to get sleep or go to fall asleep. But yeah, it's weird.
It's helpful. And again, sharing my own kind of quirks here. Again, being the person who tends to prefer staying up late and then going to bed or waking up late. But then like if I sleep in until 10 or 11, then I won't want to fall asleep. So I'll stay up late. So then I'll really sleep in, but then I really can't fall asleep. So it kind of gets worse and worse.
Right.
And now at least I'm at a point where I'll only allow myself to do that for a day or two. And then I'll be like, nope, got to whack it into place.
Right.
And I will take melatonin to kind of reset the rhythm. And it works. I remember as a side note, and I stumbled on this recently again, when we interviewed Jason Haverlack, the probiotic advisor guy, he mentioned that melatonin could be a prokinetic at low doses, but at higher doses, it might be constipating. And I wonder if that's like one piece of it for me, because I've shared, a couple of factors. A, just circadian rhythm seems to influence the gut. Also in the, what we're working on episode, in the work in progress episode, I shared that I've noticed if I sleep in, then my breakfast gets pushed back. And then if my breakfast is pushed back, that pushes my lunch back. And then that pushes my dinner back. And then it's like sleeping in also messes with my meal timing, which we know is important for the gut and motility. But then also when my circadian rhythm shifts drastically like that, then I tend to use higher doses of melatonin to whack it back into place. Right. So there's like a couple of really valid reasons why my circadian rhythm could be behind this like unexplained constipation issue. But yeah, I think melatonin, low dose until you know what your tolerance is. Again, I know now I can take like 20 milligrams and not bat an eye, but when I'm recommending it to people, I'll have them get a liquid and then, you could take like a drop and it would be almost nothing. But I'll have people, if we're trying to train the circadian rhythm a little bit and use it temporarily, I'll have them do like a drop or 2 or 3, kind of like around sunset or shortly after sunset. And then you could take a slightly bigger dose, maybe half an hour before bed. I think that's the magic sauce versus for a lot of years, I just took a big dose at bedtime. But I do feel like taking, a couple of drops, getting that system primed and ready and letting the cascade kind of start, and then giving yourself just a little bit more melatonin right before bed. I think that's a more effective way to use that supplement if you do.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Yeah. One last, I don't know if you have any more, but I have one last thing that kind of came up, was sleep tape. So I know we've talked about this before. If you feel that you might be a mouth breather at night, which I definitely historically was for a long period of time, sometimes mouth taping can really help with quality of sleep. So I don't necessarily think it helped me fall asleep faster or anything like that, but it definitely affected my sleep quality, where I felt like I was getting more REM. And felt like I was a little bit more energized. I don't think it was drastic for me. I've seen a couple people where it's been a really big game changer for them in terms of sleep quality. It's something you could try if you do notice that you have a lot of dry mouth in the morning or any symptoms of mouth breathing.
Snoring is a classic.
Yep, snoring. Grinding can sometimes be a symptom of it. So yeah, it could be something to explore. We covered it a little bit more in the myofunctional episode too, if someone wants to check that one out.
Yeah, that episode, we also talked about it. We did an episode in this season about the oral microbiome, and I think I titled it The Beginning of Your Microbiome. That was me totally baiting you guys into listening to it, because otherwise you wouldn't care. But yeah, if you go back to the Beginning of Your Microbiome episode, we talked about it in that episode as well. 2 other things briefly popped into my mind also when you mentioned this. I've played with them a little bit, and I don't know if I've discerned a pattern yet, but sometimes 2 medicinal mushrooms can be helpful for sleep. Reishi, which is an adaptogen, and lion's mane. Now, I remember once upon a time when I was in the Aura Ring users group on Facebook, I remember like searching a little bit, and somebody said, like one mushroom increases REM sleep and one mushroom increases deep sleep. And I experimented with it and I did not see that effect myself. But I have had some people do really well with the addition of either reishi mushroom or lion's mane mushroom in capsules throughout the day and how that affects sleep. So for what it's worth, there's a brand called Real Mushrooms, which I love because then that insinuates that everything else is fake mushrooms.
Don't eat those fake mushrooms.
Yeah. Well, there are quality concerns with mushroom supplements, actually, so I get what they're getting at, but you guys could check that out as well. But now I need to wrap us up because I am going to hop off of this, have a quick pee break, and then immediately hop on one of the FODMAP Freedom Q&As. So it's been a busy fall. We have a good class size this time around, and we have 6 different Q&As between me and my assistant right now. And I'm hopping on my newly created Wednesday late afternoon, early evening Q&A. So I'm going to go support my students in FODMAP Freedom and get A's to their Q's. Of note, one of the things we talked about in this week's module was sleep. So I'm probably going to end up talking about sleep in this one quite a bit. But thank you all for...
Sleep on sleep.
Yeah, just sleep on sleep. This is a big sleep day for sure. Thank you all for tuning in. And as always, we will see you in the next episode of the IBS Freedom Podcast. Toodaloo.